Good morning and welcome to New Center Maine's Political Brew. We're back after a holiday break. Happy New Year to both former Republican State Senator Phil Harriman and Democrat Ethan Strimling, also a former state senator and mayor of Portland. Happy New Year, guys.
Same to you,
Happy
Pat.
New Year.
And you, Ethan.
Good to see you. It's too bad there's nothing going on this week, but we'll muddle through. We begin on, of course, what was a very somber day. The nation marked the one-year anniversary of the insurrection at the U.S. Capitol on Thursday. President Biden strongly rebuked his predecessor.
The former president of the United States of America has created and spread a web of lies about the 2020 election. He's done so because he values power over principle, because he sees his own interest as more important than his country's interest, than America's interest.
Now, he didn't mention former President Trump by name, but he said of Trump, he's not just a former president, he's a defeated former president. There's zero proof the election results were inaccurate. Phil, what do you make of the president's remarks and Trump's response, who says Biden is working to try to deflect the incompetent job he's doing?
Well, I think the president rightly used that date to remind everyone of the riot that took place in the Capitol. That is sacred ground, so to speak, in America. And I think he was right to point out that there's no place in America for people to storm the Capitol and bust the place up. But I also think the president tried to use this as a way to deflect the challenges that he has faced, frankly, that he has created, whether it's Afghanistan or the border or inflation. It was a good opportunity for him to beat a dead horse, so to speak.
Ethan?
I don't know what you're talking about, Phil. You expect him on January 6th to be talking about those other issues, to not talk about January 6th and the fact that there was an attempted insurrection to try to block our democracy? Should he have, on Pearl Harbor Day, talk about other things other than Pearl Harbor? Of course not. This was the day that we needed to commemorate when there was an insurrection that attempted to stop our democracy. And while President Biden didn't call out our former defeated president by name, many others are and will, because he's been sowing lies for the last year. He cannot accept his own defeat. He has put his own ego ahead of America. And this was the appropriate moment for our president to finally step forward and say, you know what, we need to call this what it is. And in order for us to move forward, the truth has to be spoken.
Now, Ethan, it's worth noting Senator King said this week that we need to turn down the heat around elections. This certainly doesn't seem like it's going to happen, though.
Well, look, it's not an issue of turning down the heat or turning up the heat. It's about honesty. It's about truth. It's about talking about what's going on. And, Trump has to be called out for what he's done. His minions are being indicted around him. There's a good chance he's going to have some trouble with the law himself. This is not inciting violence. This is speaking truth.
It just seems to me to equate basically 75 people who were in the Capitol and did harm to our nation's capital, to equate that to 9/11 and Pearl Harbor. I don't see the comparison.
They were attacks on our democracy, Phil. That we're not saying that they were the same in terms of the number of lost lives. If that's the case, then you couldn't ever compare a battle in any war to another one. This was an attack on democracy. That's what people are comparing them to.
Let's turn our eyes to Augusta. Governor Janet Mills sat down with New Center Maine's Don Carrigan this week. One of the things she talked about, she said there are no COVID response policies or decisions she wishes she could do over. And she reiterated that she imposed the vaccine mandate for healthcare workers after Maine hospitals asked her to do so. Ethan, how is that message going to be received?
Yeah, I'm not sure why she's being defensive about the vaccine mandate. It was one of the stronger actions she took, and it was a responsible action. We should go even further with it. I'm concerned sometimes that some of these decisions, she's a little more concerned about the political backlash as opposed to what's best for Maine people. That vaccine mandate that she put in place was an important step. We know vaccine mandates are the best way to make sure that we increase vaccines, but she also has a lot to be proud of. She's done a very good job around our protecting the public during this pandemic. Probably one of the reasons that people appreciate the most about her tenure.
Do you believe when she says there's nothing she wishes she could do differently?
I don't know. I mean, I think most politicians will say stuff like that because they don't really want to admit a mistake especially in an election year, because it will be exploited. But I'm sure there are things she thinks back on. Every politician does, and says, boy, I would have liked to have tweaked that or done it a little better.
Now, Phil, In fact, she sounds defensive about the vaccine mandate. Isn't that because Republicans are already trying to weaponize it?
Oh, well, there's no question. As Ethan alluded to, this is an election year, so they're going to take every word, nuance that they can to their advantage. I would answer your question in the context of inconsistency is what comes to mind. We took healthcare workers and they were heroes, and now all of a sudden they're being told either get vaccinated against your will or lose your job. We're all in this together was the mantra, but when you look back, there are many instances of people weren't treated like we're all in this together. Bars were opened and libraries were closed, and big businesses could open and little businesses closed. The inconsistency, what I think is going to be the lasting legacy here.
On that same note, Portland City Councilors this week rescinded the city's state of emergency and ending the hazard pay provision that kicked in on January 1st, which for a few days made Portland's minimum wage for in-person work $19.50 an hour. They also imposed an indoor mask mandate. Some restaurant owners and employees had pushed for that. Others opposed it. Phil, was that a good call?
Again, inconsistent. I think to say, the pandemic hazard pay is over, but if you're in the city of Portland, not in South Portland, not in Westbrook, but if you're in the city of Portland, there's a mask mandate. People are getting frustrated with the multiple layers of government that are producing inconsistent public health decisions.
Ethan?
Yeah, the inconsistency here, I will agree with that word, but the inconsistency is the other way around. The people of Portland very much wanted a mask mandate. People in Portland actually want to have a vaccine requirement going into businesses, but they also want the hazard pay. Remember, the people of Portland voted for that 60-40 to have hazard pay in place. Unfortunately, our city council just buckled under the pressure of the Chamber of Commerce and a number of businesses who were coming forward pleading poverty and saying they couldn't pay their workers when, of course, they can and they did last year when it was at $18 an hour. So the inconsistency of the council here is that workers were thrown under the bus in what appears to be a deal that was perhaps cut by our mayor. I'll give you the mask mandate if you cut workers' raises.
The 130th legislature began its second session this past week. Hot topic is what to do with the projected $822 million revenue surplus. Governor Mills says she wants to return some to taxpayers, though she's not saying how much. And Republicans are also talking about how and how much to give back. Ethan, will progressives be angry with Janet Mills if she doesn't spend as much of this as they want on programs?
Well, I think Maine people will be frustrated if we don't invest this money in the affordable housing we need, in the education we need, in expanding healthcare, and all the aspects of our, forgiving student debt, criminal justice reform. There's tons of bills that the legislature passed last year that got majority support that will really help our economy and help the quality of life in Maine. And that's where they should be focusing this money, not sending a couple bucks and some change to Mainers across the state. That's not really going to help us in the long run.
Phil?
Well, I see it very differently, Pat. This is $822 million that the legislature didn't budget for, doesn't need based on the budget that's in place now. Those dollars should be returned to the taxpayers and not a one-time political gimmick in an election year, but lowering rates, whether it's the income tax rate or the sales tax rate. Give that money back to the people who created it.
And that's an important distinction. If you give a rebate, that's a one-time thing. You do a tax cut, maybe that affects your budget next time around in the next cycle when you don't have this kind of surplus.
Sorry.
I was going to say that's true, but remember, a lot of the money that has come into the state of Maine from the federal government was additional debt that we're also going to have to repay.
Senator Angus King has come aboard with the idea of filibuster reform in order to enact the Freedom to Vote Act, saying that voting rights and the elections process are in danger. Senator Susan Collins says claiming that some states are engaged in voter suppression now is alarmism that is itself a threat to public trust in our elections. How do we sort this out, Ethan?
Angus King is right, and we need to do filibuster reform. We've done it in the past. We've been fighting for this forever. If there is any reason to do it, it's around democracy and trying to make sure that we provide every ample opportunity for every American who has the right to vote. And for Susan Collins to not see that what states are doing in terms of making it harder for people to mail in ballots and making people wait in lines longer to vote, shorter registration times, all of this stuff, of course, reduces the vote, suppresses the vote. And this is where the federal government, just like we did in civil rights battles, just like we did in terms of women were blocked from the right to vote, federal government has to step in and say, you know what, elections are sacred in this country, and we will make sure that everybody has a chance to vote who is eligible.
Phil, what do you think?
Well, this is the same senator just recently who said we got to turn down the heat around democracy. If he wants to turn up the heat, pass a bill in Washington that gives the bureaucrats in Washington total control over elections in all 50 states. If you really want to turn down the heat and make it easier to vote, respond to the people who say, I think it's more than 70% of Americans believe that you should have a voter ID to vote. Put that out there, make it easy for people to vote and hard to cheat.
And
Well,
Ethan, it's worth noting that Senator Collins points out that the existing Voting Rights Act allows the Justice Department to sue states that are engaging in discriminatory rules on voting. Isn't that enough?
Yes, as they should.
And obviously it isn't enough. And the voter ID provision you just spoke about, Phil, please call Senator Collins and tell her to support the Voting Rights Act. It includes a voter ID provision.
Well, there you go. We'll sort this out ourselves. A federal judge has ordered Maine elections officials to allow Libertarian Party members in Maine to re-enroll and to nominate candidates for the upcoming 2022 elections. The order requires Secretary of State Shenna Bellows to send letters informing Libertarians that their enrollment was unenrollment, I should say. It was unlawful, and they may rejoin. Libertarians can nominate parties for the upcoming election, regardless of whether their numbers reach the minimum threshold outlined by law because of tight timetables. Phil, does any of this have any impact on the elections we're looking for in the fall?
I'm not sure it does. I'm not sure if there is enough libertarian registered voters to impact the outcome of an election. But I do agree with the judge. I shouldn't be denied party affiliation because of some law or regulation in Augusta. I think that was the right decision, and good for him and good for us.
Ethan?
Yeah, you know, I'm as far afield from most of the libertarian policies as you can get, but they have every right to be part of a party. It's very good the judge smacked down Maine and said you can't just unenroll people. In terms of your question of whether this will have an impact, the only way it'll have an impact is if a strong libertarian candidate actually gets on the ballot. Libertarians can vote for whomever they like, Paul LePage or Janet Mills, assuming they're the only two candidates. But if they get a strong libertarian candidate running, that could certainly hurt Paul LePage.
All right, we'll wrap up with a little twist on winners and losers in politics this week by doing a little scorecard on predictions that were made a year ago about the upcoming year in politics. Let's listen to one of those predictions.
Either Jared, Shelley, or Janet are going to announce they are not running for re-election. One of those three in 2021 will announce they are not running for re-election in 2022. Those are only three folks who are in our national or statewide offices that will be up in 2022. And I think one is going to either run for something else or step out.
Yeah, I didn't quite get that one right. I'll be honest. At the time, I didn't say who, and I thought it was actually going to be Janet Mills, because remember, at the time, she hadn't raised any money. It was such a tough slog through the first couple of years because of COVID, and I thought she's just going to go out on top, but she definitely decided to run again. So.
To be fair, she has not officially announced she's running. When Don Carrigan asked her last week, she said, I'm not going to talk about that yet. We've got to focus on COVID. So you might have a shot to wiggle out of this.
I could still be right.
All right, let's hear about what Phil had to say.
As I look ahead in my day job, I do financial planning, and I see firsthand the financial difficulties that family businesses and individuals have experienced in 2020. I think that's going to translate into a lot lower tax revenues for the state of Maine, which in turn is going to cause the legislature to wrestle probably well into the summer months to get the state budget balanced. And the key is, are they going to try to raise taxes?
All right, Phil, what do you make of that one?
Is that oven with the crow baking ready yet?
I'm sure you got some other ones right.
Not only was I wrong, Pat, I'm off by $822 million in the other direction.
Of course, at the time, you couldn't have projected the federal spigots would open up and
No.
help bail out the states.
You're so kind to bail me out. Thank you, Pat.
Yeah, hey, come on now.
All right,
He bailed me out a little
quick
bit,
prediction.
too.
We'll wrap up. Quick prediction from each of you. First, Phil, what's going to happen this year?
Paul LePage gets reelected.
Ethan?
Janet Mills gets reelected.
All right, only one will win. That's News Center Maine's Political Brew. Glad you could be with us. We'll see you next time. News Center Maine's back after this.